The desert stretched endlessly under a dying sun, its sands the color of blood and old rust. Each shimmered in waves that distorted the horizon, twisting the ruins scattered across the plains into ghostly shapes. And there, in the center of that wasteland, half buried in obsidian rock, stood the sword. It wasn't just a weapon. It was a monument, a relic older than the species that now knelt before it. Its blade shimmered faintly, though no light touched it, and every so often a pulse of energy rippled through the air, like a heartbeat buried in the planet itself. For 10,000 years, the sword of Escher had remained untouched. No creature, no machine, no god of this world had managed to lift it. The blade had chosen silence. Captain Elias, Ward had heard the stories even before his shuttle descended through the violet clouds of Varlos 9. The aliens who lived here, the Enrithi, called it the Trial of the Lost Star. To them, the sword was sacred, a gift from beings who had once ruled the stars. They claimed it had been forged from the bones of a dying sun, embedded into the stone to await the one who was worthy. Every 100 years, their strongest would try. Every 100 years, the sword refused. But now they had brought a human. Elias stood at the edge of the temple plateau, his boots sinking slightly into the dust. The structure before him rose like a black pyramid, its surface covered in markings that glowed faintly with blue light, veins of energy pulsing outward from the central platform. And there, at the top of 1,000 worn steps, the sword waited. "You're certain this isn't a trap?" he asked, his voice low through the comlink. The alien beside him, an elder named Sierra, shifted on her 4 legs, her silver carapace glinting in the sun. "It is not a trap, human. It is a test. The sword responds to the essence of life. Our kind has failed for eons. You are different, Elias repeated dryly. That's one way to put it. The air was heavy with expectation. Hundreds of Enrethi had gathered around the base of the temple, their long necks craning upward, eyes glowing with bioluminescent light. They didn't speak. They didn't move. They watched. Elias took a deep breath and began the climb. The stone steps were uneven, worn smooth by centuries of pilgrimages that had ended in failure. As he ascended, the hum of energy grew stronger, resonating through his chest like distant thunder. When he finally reached the top, he saw the sword up close for the first time. It was enormous, longer than any human-made weapon, its blade a translucent silver blue that seemed to shift between solid and ethereal. The hilt was carved from black metal shot through with glowing veins of gold, symbols spiraling up its length in languages Elias didn't recognize. And it was beautiful, terrifyingly beautiful. He stepped closer. The ground beneath him vibrated, responding to his presence. Sierra's voice crackled in his ear. "Do not touch it yet. You must wait for the pulse." "The pulse?" he asked. "It will test your nature," she said. "The sword must feel your intent." Elias frowned. "I'm not here to steal your relic, lady. You're the ones who begged me to try." There was a long pause. Then Sierra replied softly, "We did not beg, Captain Ward. We believed." Elias exhaled and looked down at his hands. He had seen wars that broke civilizations, witnessed machines devour planets, and watched soldiers die screaming for causes they didn't understand. Belief wasn't something he carried easily anymore, but something about the sword. Pulled at him, he stepped forward until he could see his reflection in the mirrored surface of the blade. It was faint, distorted, but it was there. He reached out, fingers hovering just above the hilt. The air stilled. The wind died. Even the faint hum of the sword ceased. And then it happened. A vibration, deep and rhythmic, rolled through the stone beneath his boots. The pulse. It was faint at first, then grew stronger, thudding through the rock like the heartbeat of a giant sleeping beneath the desert. The aliens below began to murmur, a low, melodic chant rising from the crowd. Elias swallowed. "All right," he muttered to himself. "Let's see what kind of trick this is." He wrapped his hand around the hilt. At first, nothing. The metal was warm beneath his palm, almost alive, but it didn't move. He tightened his grip, braced his feet, and pulled. Still nothing. He gritted his teeth and tried again. His muscles strained, sweat forming on his forehead. The sword didn't even tremble. Below, the chanting stopped. Sira's voice was calm, almost sad. "It seems the sword rejects you too." Elias let go, flexing his fingers. "Story of my life," he muttered. But then, as he stepped back, something strange happened. The sword pulsed again, harder this time. A ripple of light spread across the temple floor, and the air crackled with static. Elias froze. The sword was moving. The vibrations grew stronger, shaking the entire platform. Dust cascaded from the stone walls. The Enrethi gasped and fell silent. The hilt glowed brighter, and faint lines of light extended outward, forming a circle of symbols around Elias's feet. Sira's voice came through the comm, urgent now. "Captain, step away from it." Elias tried, but his boots were stuck. It was as if invisible hands were holding him in place. He felt a tug in his chest, a magnetic pull that drew him toward the sword again. Against his will, his hand lifted, reaching for it. The moment his fingers brushed the hilt, a flash of energy exploded outward. He saw everything and nothing at once. The sky vanished, replaced by a sea of fire and stars. The world around him melted into images that weren't his own. Armies of alien warriors, marching beneath two suns. Titans of stone tearing cities apart, and above it all, a great blade descending from the heavens, cutting through gods like paper. The voice came then, deep, ancient, echoing through his skull. "You are not of this world. Yet you carry its wound," Elias gasped, falling to his knees. The sword's light engulfed him completely now, surrounding him like liquid fire. Who are you?" he managed to say. The voice rumbled as if amused. "I am memory." "I'm silence. I am what remains of those who once ruled the stars. This world remembers our promise." The words vibrated through him, heavy with sorrow and power. The sword wasn't just a weapon, it was alive. Or at least it remembered what it had been. Elias struggled to stay conscious. His heartbeat synced with the blade's rhythm, faster and faster, until it felt like his chest might burst. Images flashed again, this time more vivid. He saw a massive gate carved into the side of a planet, glowing with energy. Behind it, darkness moved, something vast and hungry, sealed away. The voice whispered, softer now. "Will you finish what they began?" Elias's breath hitched. "Finish what? What are you talking about?" But the sword didn't answer. Instead, it pulsed once more, and the vision shattered. He was back on the platform, gasping for air. The sword had gone dark again, but his hand still glowed faintly where he'd touched it. The skin there was burned, marked with strange symbols that shimmered faintly in the dim light. Below, the Nerethi were in chaos. Some were bowing, others fleeing, their voices a mix of awe and terror. "He awakened it," one cried. "The human has awakened the heart of Eshar." Elias stumbled to his feet, disoriented. What the hell just happened? Sira's voice was trembling through the comm. "You touched the memory. The sword spoke to you. That has not happened since the fall of the first kings." Elias stared at the weapon, his pulse still racing. The hilt shimmered faintly, as though alive. The marks on his hand burned brighter in response. "What does it want?" he asked. There was silence on the other end. Then Sira spoke quietly. "It wants what it has always wanted. To be wielded once more." Elias looked down at his hand. The symbols moved slightly as though alive, pulsing in time with the sword's faint glow. For the first time in years, a sliver of something strange crawled into his chest, something dangerously close to destiny. He turned back to the blade. The hum in the air deepened, and the ground beneath him began to shake again. Sira's voice rose sharply. "Captain Ward! Step away from it, now!" But Elias didn't move. He couldn't. The sword's light was pulling him closer, its voice whispering faintly at the edges of his mind, weaving itself into his thoughts. "They could not lift me," it said. "They were not bound to the wound, but you are the echo of what was lost." Elias's breath caught in his throat. He didn't understand the words, but somehow he knew what they meant. Humanity wasn't supposed to be here, not on this world, not in this galaxy. Yet something about him, about his kind, resonated with whatever the sword had been waiting for. The Nerethi below began to chant again, louder this time. The entire desert seemed to hum in harmony. The sword pulsed, brighter than ever. Elias's hand lifted almost involuntarily, his fingers brushing the hilt one more time. The moment he did, the stone around the blade cracked open like thunder, splitting the sky, and the sword trembled, no longer defying him, but answering. The sky above Varlos 9 darkened as the sword's pulse faded into silence, but its echo still thrummed in Elias's bones. The alien crowd stood frozen below the temple, hundreds of glowing eyes fixed on him as he knelt before the weapon. The cracked stone around the sword shimmered faintly, each fracture glowing with golden light. The air smelled of ozone and dust, heavy with electricity that refused to die away. Elias's hand still burned. When he looked down, the symbols seared into his skin pulsed softly, 3 jagged lines intersecting at the center of his palm like a constellation. He flexed his fingers and hissed as a spark leapt between them. From the base of the temple, a shrill tone echoed through the comlink. Sira's voice broke through, sharp with panic. "Do not touch it again! Whatever you awakened is unstable." Elias's laugh was bitter and breathless. Little late for that. The hum beneath his feet deepened, vibrating through the stone. He turned his head toward the horizon. The red sun that had been sinking moments before now hung, suspended, frozen in place. The light it cast across the desert turned strange, metallic. Something wasn't right. A sudden wind tore across the plateau, carrying with it a sound, like whispers made of thunder. The alien priests below began to chant again, their voices blending into a haunting harmony. "The wound has answered. The wound has answered." Elias stumbled backward, his boots scraping against the cracked platform. He raised his burned hand, feeling the faint vibration growing stronger. The sword was calling to him again. Then it spoke. The seal was broken once. "It remembers the blood of stars. Shall you end it or free it?" Elias froze. The voice wasn't external this time. It wasn't even in his ears. It pulsed directly through his skull, deep and resonant, old enough to feel like a memory of something that had never belonged to him. "Who are you?" he demanded, scanning the empty air. The sword answered in emotion, not words, images that stabbed into his mind. He saw titans of metal and light locked in battle across a burning sky. He saw oceans turn to glass. He saw alien kings wielding the blade before him, and then falling one by one as the sword rejected them in death. Elias staggered, clutching his head. Stop it!" But the visions didn't stop. He saw a shape in the darkness beyond the stars, something vast and formless, watching. He saw a hand, not human, not alien, reach for the sword and plunge it into the heart of a planet. The vision ended with fire consuming everything. The voice spoke once more, soft as wind. "You carry its wound." Then everything went black. When he opened his eyes, he was lying on the stone floor, gasping. The aliens were gone. Only Sira remained, standing at the top of the steps, her silver carapace flickering with bioluminescent patterns that shifted like ripples of panic. Elias forced himself to sit up. "What the hell just happened?" Sira moved toward him cautiously. "You touched the blade of a Shah. You heard it," he nodded weakly. "Yeah, I heard something, all right." Her 4 eyes narrowed. "Then it knows you. That is impossible." "Try me," Elias said, standing unsteadily. "I've been called impossible before." Sira hesitated, then knelt beside the sword. Her mandibles clicked softly in thought. The last to hear its voice was Ishar himself, the first of our kind to walk this world. The blade turned silent after his fall. "For a human to awaken, it means—" She trailed off. "Means what?" Elias asked. "Means you are what the legends feared," she said quietly. "The returner. The child born of dust and fire." Elias frowned. "You're losing me." "Start from the beginning," she looked up at him. "Our oldest texts speak of a war that ended the age of stars, a war that burned across galaxies. The sword was forged to seal the wound of creation, the tear between what is and what should never be. When the seal weakened, the weapon would call for one who carried the memory of that wound. Someone outside its cycle. Someone human, Elias blinked. That's insane. Sira stood slowly, her eyes glinting with both awe and fear. And yet the sword moved for you. He turned to the blade, which now hovered slightly above the cracked stone. The golden veins along its length shimmered with slow, deliberate rhythm. It wasn't metal anymore. It looked alive, like a vein of molten energy given shape. Elias reached toward it instinctively, then stopped himself. If this thing's some kind of lock, what happens if it opens? Sira's antennae twitched. The old ones called it the Gate of Shadows. Beyond it lies the remnants of what our ancestors imprisoned. The devourer of suns, the one who made the wound. Elias rubbed his temples. Perfect. So I'm standing on top of a planetary death trap. Before Sira could respond, the wind shifted again. This time, it carried with it a low rumble from the heavens. The air shimmered, distorting the sunlight. Sira turned sharply. No, it cannot be. Elias followed her gaze upward. 3 enormous silhouettes broke through the clouds, massive ships, black and sleek, their surfaces carved with the same golden runes that glowed on the sword. Each vessel was shaped like a spearhead, their hulls crackling with blue lightning as they descended. Friends of yours? Elias muttered. Sira's voice trembled. They are not alive. They are the keepers, guardians of the seal. They awaken when the blade calls. The ships roared closer, each one the size of a mountain. As they neared the desert floor, the wind whipped violently around the temple, sending torrents of dust spiraling into the air. The Enrethi, who had fled now, threw themselves to the ground, chanting prayers in their guttural tongue. Elias shielded his face, his voice rising. Sira, what do they want? She glanced at the sword, then at him. They want to see if you are worthy, or to destroy you if you are not. That's comforting, he said through gritted teeth. The nearest ship stopped directly above them, blotting out the sun. Its underside split open like an iris, revealing a massive, glowing sphere suspended inside, a core of energy that pulsed in time with the sword. The sword answered. A beam of light shot from the blade into the sky, connecting with the ship's core. The impact sent a shockwave across the desert, flattening everything within miles. Elias staggered back, barely keeping his footing. What's it doing? He shouted. Sira didn't answer. Her gaze was fixed on the beam. The sword is speaking to them. To who? To the ancestors. The light intensified, blinding. Elias threw an arm over his face. The sound was deafening. 1,000 metallic voices chanting in unison. The beam flickered once, then turned blood red. Sira screamed. They've judged you. Elias turned toward her, but before he could ask what she meant, the light exploded. The sky cracked open, revealing not space, but darkness, an abyss that writhed like something alive. For an instant he glimpsed movement beyond it. Something vast, something breathing, the voice returned. They come to finish what they began. The seal weakens. The wound bleeds again. The words shook him to his core. He looked up at the ships. One by one, they began to fall from the sky, crashing into the desert with thunderous explosions. Each impact sent fire spreading across the sands. Sira grabbed his arm. We must leave. The sword has chosen its path. Elias stared at her, the wind tearing at his coat. You're saying it chose me, and now it's calling an army of, what, demons? Gods, she met his gaze, her expression unreadable. It does not matter what we call them. You are bound to it now. Whatever happens next will come through you. The sword pulsed again, brighter than before. The markings on Elias's hand flared in response, and he screamed as pain lanced through his body. The symbols crawled up his arm like living fire, spreading across his chest. Captain Ward, Sira cried, reaching for him. But before she could touch him, the sword lifted itself fully from the stone and hovered between them. The hum of its power filled the air, deeper and more resonant than before. The light from its blade enveloped Elias, lifting him off the ground. His body arched, every nerve alight with unbearable energy. Through the haze of pain, he heard the voice again. The seal is broken. They will come now. And then the light spread outward. From the horizon, the other ships, the ones that had remained intact, began to move. They weren't descending anymore. They were opening, Panels unfolded, revealing colossal figures inside, beings of molten metal and bone, each one holding a weapon shaped like the sword's twin. Their eyes burned like dying suns. Sira fell to her knees, her voice barely audible over the storm. The Keepers awaken, and the War of the Wound begins again. Elias's scream echoed across the desert, drowned by the roar of the sky tearing apart. The sword's glow reached its peak, and a beam of white fire shot from his chest into the heavens. The alien priests below began to wail, their chants turning to cries of despair. When the light finally faded, Elias hovered in silence. His eyes were open, but they no longer looked human. He drifted down slowly, the sword hovering before him like a loyal hound awaiting command. The wind stilled, and even the burning wreckage of the ship seemed to bow in submission. Sira looked up at him in awe and fear. "What are you?" she whispered. Elias turned his gaze toward her. His voice was quiet, but it vibrated through the air like thunder rolling beneath the earth. "I don't know," he said. "But whatever I am, they're coming for me." And in the distance, beyond the horizon, a shadow began to rise, a shape so vast it blotted out the stars. The sky was no longer a sky, it was an open wound. Crimson light bled through cracks that hadn't existed moments ago, the edges of reality trembling like torn fabric. The sword of Ishar hovered before Elias, suspended in the air by invisible threads of energy. Its glow pulsed with a rhythm that was not its own anymore, but his. Every time his heart beat, the sword answered. Below the shattered temple, the desert was chaos. The Enrethi, thousands of them, fled in every direction, their iridescent bodies illuminated by the unnatural fire raining from the heavens. The colossal ships that had once hung over the planet now burned in pieces, their remains streaking through the atmosphere like falling suns. Yet amid the destruction, something else was awakening. Elias stood motionless at the center of it all, eyes glowing the same molten gold as the sword. He felt detached, as though he were both inside his body and outside it, watching himself through another's gaze. The pain had vanished, replaced by a strange clarity that bordered on peace. The voice returned, soft but commanding, filling every corner of his mind. "The Keepers have fallen. The seal falters. You must decide." He turned slowly toward Sira, who stood several meters away, one arm shielding her eyes from the blinding light that radiated from him. "Decide what?" he shouted. "I don't even know what's happening." She took a step closer, struggling to keep her footing, as the ground cracked beneath her claws. "The sword carries power beyond time. The wound beneath this world, it is breaking open. You have to stop it before it consumes everything." "The wound," Elias echoed. The moment he spoke the word, his mind erupted with images again. An endless pit beneath the surface of the planet, swirling with black fire and screaming faces. He saw hands, thousands of them, reaching upward from the abyss. They weren't human, weren't alien. "They were wrong," he gasped, clutching his chest. "What is that thing?" Sira's voice shook. "The thing our ancestors sealed away. The thing your kind was never meant to wake." Elias laughed bitterly, though it came out more like a gasp. "Then why the hell did your people ask me to touch it?" She lowered her gaze, mandibles trembling. "Because only something not of this world could touch what was made before it." The sword pulsed again, louder this time, and the temple shuddered. The sky rippled with streaks of light that fell like meteors, slamming into the ground miles away. Each impact sent shockwaves through the desert, carving deep craters into the red sand. Elias staggered as the ground split beneath him, opening into a fissure that glowed with faint blue light. The air itself seemed to hum with anticipation. "Sira, get back!" he yelled, but she didn't move. Her eyes were fixed on the widening crack at Elias's feet. "It's opening," she whispered. "The wound is opening." The fissure erupted, sending a column of energy straight into the sky. Elias was thrown backward, the shockwave hurling him against the remnants of the temple wall. The sword followed him, spinning through the air like a living thing. It landed point first beside him, embedding itself into the stone. Sira cried out, crawling toward him through the debris. "Elias, the blade, grab it!" He blinked through the haze of dust and smoke. "Why?" "Because if you don't," she said, her voice trembling, "it will choose for you." He turned to the sword. Its light was pulsing faster now, the rhythm almost frantic. It was waiting. Elias reached out a shaking hand, hesitating for a fraction of a second before gripping the hilt. The instant his fingers touched it, light exploded outward in a blinding wave. The desert vanished. He was standing somewhere else, an endless void filled with swirling clouds of light and shadow. The stars themselves looked close enough to touch. The sword floated before him, and around it silhouettes formed, figures made of light, towering and indistinct. The voice came again, but this time it was not one voice. It was many, layered atop one another. "We are the first, the architects of this prison. We forged the blade to hold the darkness, but it fed on us. It remembers us, and now it remembers you." Elias turned in a slow circle, the air vibrating with energy. "If you're the ones who made this thing, tell me how to stop it." "There is no stopping it," they said in unison. "Only balance. One must bear the burden. One must become the seal." He took a step back. "You mean someone has to die, not die, transform. The blade must bind itself to a soul willing to bear the wound anew. Your kind was made for this." Elias clenched his jaw. "Made for it? We came from another world. We're explorers, not sacrifices." The voices grew softer, almost mournful. "You came from us. The spark that birthed your species came from the stars we left behind. You are our echo." Elias's mind spun. He saw flashes again. Earth, ancient and untouched, bathed in starlight. Something vast streaked through its skies eons ago, a fragment of this same sword. He realized then that the wound they spoke of wasn't just beneath this planet. It was in everything. Before he could reply, the void shattered like glass. He fell back into the world of sand and flame. Sirah's hands were on him, shaking him. "Elias, the ships, they're waking." He looked up. The wrecks of the fallen keepers were rising, their broken forms reshaping, merging into new constructs. From the twisted metal and stone, colossal figures emerged, taller than mountains, their bodies composed of molten armor and fragments of the ships that had once carried them. Their eyes burned white, fixed on the sword. Sirah's voice was barely audible over the tremors. "They've sensed the blade's bond. They're coming to claim it." Elias stood shakily, gripping the sword. "They'll have to pry it from me." The nearest Titan let out a sound like a dying planet, a roar that shook the clouds apart. It raised one arm, and energy surged along its body, forming a spear of lightning that crackled with the same symbols carved into the temple walls. Elias braced himself. "What do I do?" Sirah shouted back, "It's alive! Let it guide you." He didn't have time to think. The Titan hurled the spear. The impact never came. The sword in Elias's hand moved on its own, spinning in a wide arc. A wave of blinding energy erupted from its blade, splitting the sky in half. The spear disintegrated mid-air. The Titan reeled backward, one arm severed by the force of the blast. The desert floor ignited in a spiral of white fire that spread for miles. Sirah stared, her voice trembling. "You wielded it." Elias looked at the sword, disbelief and terror mingling on his face. "It wielded me." The other Titans began to move, their heavy footsteps shaking the planet's crust. From the fissure at the temple's heart, a new light began to emerge, black yet radiant, as if darkness itself had learned to shine. The wound was awake now, no longer content to whisper beneath the surface. Sirah turned toward Elias, desperation in her eyes. "You have to seal it before it's too late. The sword is the key, use it." He shook his head. "I don't know how." The voice returned inside him, deeper and colder than before. "You do. You always have." The blade flared, and Elias felt something break open inside his mind. For a brief moment, he understood everything. The nature of the wound, the power that had forged it, the countless civilizations that had risen and fallen trying to contain it. The sword was not a weapon. It was a promise. He raised the blade high. Energy coiled around it, forming a vortex of light that connected heaven and earth. The Titans charged, their roars shaking the world. But Elias swung downward, cleaving the air itself. The explosion that followed was beyond sound. The world dissolved into pure light. The Titans were erased, the fissure closed, and the sky itself burned white. Sira fell to the ground, covering her head as the energy washed over her. When the light finally faded, everything was still. The desert was gone. The temple was gone. Only a vast crater remained, filled with faintly glowing sand. At its center, Elias stood, the sword embedded in the ground before him. Sira approached slowly, her limbs shaking. "Captain?" He didn't answer. His body was motionless, his head bowed. The glow had left the sword, but now it shone from within him. Sira's breath caught. "You became the seal." Elias raised his head. His eyes blazed gold, twin suns burning in the dim light. "No," he said quietly. "I became the memory." The air trembled, and a faint hum rolled through the planet. The same hum the Enrethi had heard in their prayers for centuries. The sword pulsed once more, and vanished into his chest. Sira dropped to her knees, tears reflecting the glow that lingered around him. What will happen now? Elias looked toward the horizon, where the sun was finally rising again, unbroken. "Now," he said, "it sleeps again." But as he turned to walk away, his reflection in the glassy sand didn't follow. It smiled. The world that had burned now stood silent. The fires that had devoured the sky were gone, leaving behind only the echo of wind sweeping across a field of glass. The desert was no longer red but clear. Every grain of sand fused into a reflective plain that stretched as far as the horizon. The sword was gone. The temple was gone. And in their place, standing alone in the center of the crater, was Elias Ward. He felt weightless, not light, but hollow, as if something inside him had been carved out. His hand still glowed faintly. The runes burned into his flesh, now pulsing with slow, rhythmic light. The hum of the sword no longer came from the air or the earth. It came from within him. Sira approached cautiously, her clawed feet clicking against the cooled glass. Her breathing was shallow, her silver carapace dull from the heat and shock of what had happened. "Elias," she whispered.
"Is it finished?"
He turned toward her. His face was calm, but his eyes were not the same. The blue had been replaced by a soft, molten gold that seemed to shimmer with a life of its own. "Finished," he said quietly. "Oh, for now." Sira looked around at the wasteland that had once been her people's sacred ground. The horizon shimmered with faint heat, but there was no more fire, no more chaos, only silence. "The sword's gone," she said. "Where did it go?" Elias raised his palm. The runes burned brighter, lines of gold light tracing up his arm to his shoulder. "It didn't leave," he said. "It found a place to rest." She stared at him, realization dawning slowly. You bound it to yourself," he nodded once. "It wanted a bearer. It got one." The wind picked up, carrying with it a faint sound, a hum that wasn't wind at all, but resonance, like the distant echo of a song played on unseen strings. Elias closed his eyes. The sound wasn't external. It was alive inside him, whispering, waiting. Sira lowered her head. "You've become the seal." Elias laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. "That's what it feels like." He turned his gaze upward. The sky had cleared completely, showing the pale shimmer of stars even in daylight. "But the wound still exists." "It's sleeping now, sealed again. Not gone." She took a slow step closer, her mandibles clicking nervously. "If it sleeps inside you, human, then it means you are the prison. You carry it." He nodded again. "I know." Silence stretched between them. The calm after the storm was not peace. It was the heavy, oppressive quiet of a battlefield after everything living had been burned away. Sira finally spoke. "Our legends said the one who wielded the blade would either save us or destroy us. We'd never imagined it could be both." Elias turned to her, studying the alien priestess who had started this. Her skin was cracked from heat, and her bioluminescence flickered weakly, like a candle fighting to stay lit. "You didn't know what you were awakening," he said softly. No, she admitted. We only knew the prophecies. We thought the sword would grant salvation. He smiled faintly. It never promised that. The wind shifted again, and with it came a new sound, a distant rumble, low and deep. Sira's head snapped toward the horizon, her antennae twitching. What is that? Elias frowned. The ground vibrated faintly under his boots. It wasn't the rhythmic pulse of the sword this time. It was something heavier, alive. Then the light changed. The sunlight dimmed, not as if the sun had set, but as if something enormous had moved between it and the world. Indias turned his gaze upward and froze. Far above the atmosphere, beyond the faint halo of the planet's curve, hung something vast, too vast to comprehend. It was not a ship. It was not a creature. It was a shadow with shape, a wound in space itself. The sword's voice whispered faintly inside him. The seal is mended, but the memory endures. The wound remembers. Sira followed his gaze and sank to her knees. By the stars, she whispered. It's watching. Elias's hand clenched. He could feel it. The same presence that had haunted his visions, the same hunger he had seen in the abyss beneath the planet. It wasn't gone. It had simply moved. It was staring down at him. Then it knows where I am, he murmured. Yes, Sira said. It always knew. You carry its mark now. Wherever you go, it will follow. He looked at her. Then I'll have to make sure it follows me somewhere it can't hurt anyone else. She stared at him, unblinking. You would leave this world? He glanced around at the glass plains, the distant mountains, reduced to molten silhouettes. There's nothing left here, and if it wakes again, it'll come for everything it touches. I can't stay. Sira rose unsteadily. You can't outrun it, human. The sword chose you for balance, not escape. Balance? Elias echoed, his tone hardening. You saw what happened, Sira. That wasn't balance. That was annihilation. Sira's voice grew quieter. Perhaps destruction was the only kind of balance this world had left. He didn't answer. He turned his gaze toward the crater's edge, where his ship, half buried and scorched, still sat tilted on its side. Miraculously, the frame was intact. The systems were likely dead, but he could fix that. He had to. The voice of the sword, softer now, almost human, whispered in his mind again. You are bound, but you are not trapped. You are what they feared and what they need. The memory must be carried, he whispered back. And if I refuse... There was a pause. Then it will find another, he exhaled shakily. So there's no choice. There is always choice, the voice said. But choices carry weight. You were made for burden. He felt something shift inside his chest, a deep ache that wasn't pain but memory. For a brief moment, he saw his home again, earth blue and bright beneath a clear sky. The sound of ocean waves, the smell of rain. He hadn't thought about it in years. It felt distant, fragile, like a dream he could never return to. Sira approached again. What will you do now? Elias looked at her one last time. What I have to. He started walking toward the ship, his boots leaving faint golden footprints on the glass. The sword's hum followed him like a second heartbeat. Behind him, Sira watched silently. You'll die, she said. He didn't stop. Maybe, but if I stay, so will everyone else. She lowered her head, her voice trembling. Then may the stars remember you. Elias paused at the edge of the crater. The wind stirred his hair, carrying the faint scent of ozone and ash. He looked back once, offering a small, tired smile. They already do. He climbed into the ship. The cockpit was a ruin of flickering panels and fractured glass, but he managed to power the auxiliary systems. The engines coughed weakly, then roared to life. As the ship lifted off, the crater below shimmered with reflected sunlight. Sira watched as the vessel ascended, a trail of fire cutting through the pale sky. She could still feel the hum of the sword in the air, faint but eternal. The seal would hold, for now. Inside the ship, Elias sat at the controls, his eyes locked on the heavens. The voice of the sword whispered softly behind his thoughts. You are not alone, bearer. I don't want company, he said aloud. You will have it anyway. He gave a dry laugh. Figures. The stars outside blurred as he broke through the atmosphere. Beyond the curve of the planet, the shadow still waited, colossal, patient, stretching across the void like the ghost of a god. The ship's sensors flickered with static. "Unidentified anomaly detected," the computer said in a flat tone. "Yeah," Elias muttered. "I see it." He gripped the controls tighter. The runes on his hand flared again, glowing brighter as he approached the shadow. His ship shook violently, alarms blaring. "It is not your enemy," the sword's voice murmured. "It is your mirror." "What does that mean?" "What you seal, you carry. What you carry, you become," he frowned. "You're saying it's me?" "It always was." The realization struck him like cold iron. The wound, the darkness he had sealed away. It wasn't just an ancient evil. It was a reflection, a creation born from the same spark as his own kind. Humanity wasn't separate from the wound. It was its echo, its continuation. He swallowed hard, staring at the vast shadow looming ahead. "Then maybe it's time I ended both." He flipped the controls, diverting all power to the thrusters. The ship surged forward, engines howling. The shadow grew larger, filling the viewport until it was all he could see. The sword's hum reached a fever pitch, vibrating through his skull. Syrah's voice crackled faintly through the comlink, distorted by static. "Elias, what are you doing?" He smiled faintly. "Finishing what they started." The ship hurtled into the heart of the shadow. For a moment, everything vanished. Sound, light, time. There was only white, and then silence. From the surface of Varlos 9, Syrah watched as a burst of light erupted across the sky, brighter than the sun. It burned for 10 long seconds before fading, leaving only calm and clear stars. The hum that had filled the air for centuries was gone. Syrah sank to her knees, bowing her head. Around her the wind whispered softly across the glass plains. She could almost hear his voice in it, quiet but certain. "It sleeps again." She rose slowly, turning her gaze toward the stars. For the first time in her people's memory, the heavens were silent, but deep in the void, beyond the reach of any world, the light stirred again. A single blade of gold shimmered in the dark, pulsing like a heartbeat, and somewhere in the endless quiet between stars, a human voice whispered, "I remember."